Hello everyone and welcome back to the Me I Never Knew Life Coaching Services. I am your coach Zuri, and today we're going to be talking about energy, frequency, and nurturing your spiritual essence and the benefits of how and when you do that, how it shows up in your physical life. Okay, so I need to pre-reference something so that you can understand the reason for the story. Now, my son Jonathan was 19 when he ascended, but his whole entire life, he always liked Monopoly. He liked, taking people's property. He liked the money aspect. And he always really grasped the concept that Monopoly was about learning about life and different things of that sort. So even into his adulthood, I know he was 19, but my child was an old soul. He still loved to play that game. It was on his memorabilia table, and anybody that knew Jonathan knew that he loved Monopoly. So I'll take you back to about 3 years ago when he first ascended. This was a card that he made for me in the 5th grade. It was a Mother's Day card. And you can see all the colors, and he was talking about the different things that he liked to do with his mom. But on the very last page, to close out, him and his mama, he drew this, and he said, my favorite thing to do was to play Monopoly with my mom. So you can see the board, and you can see me on one side, and you can see him on the other side. So that was 5th grade, okay? So again, going back to about 3 years ago when he passed, it was on his memorabilia table. But part of, basically what happened from a result of him passing was I ended up losing my employment. I was furloughed because of COVID. And then when I started working, I had been there just a few months. And obviously I didn't have enough time for bereavement. And also, just future tense, it was a situation where they didn't think that I would be able to come back as soon as they would need me to come back. So they made a decision for me to terminate my employment, and that's just part of what it was. So I had to be okay with that, and with it, I was like, well, shoot, what's something that I would do if I wasn't working? I always wanted to go to Africa, so I did. I did not want to come back here. I went to Ghana. I loved every bit of it. Loved the food, the culture, the weather, everything was great. But just being in tune with myself and what it is that I've been called to do, I needed to be able to come back here and do that. And so coming back, there were some people that knew me before. They heard about the situation, and they offered me a position. And so it was remote. I took it, and I just worked it for a few days. And when I tell you, it was so stressful, and coming from, just a couple months of being able to feel so free and liberated and really just picking up and going and on this path of least resistance, it was hard for me to kind of get back into this rigid structure, rush environment. Even though I was home, that was just the feeling that was over me from working that position. And I just started to not feel good. It just didn't feel good to me in any capacity, even though it's like, okay, you're making money to pay your bills. I just didn't like it. So I was like, logically, I need this job because I'm still taking care of my youngest son. At the time was 16, and I need to be able to pay my bills and kind of just get back on track. But I couldn't really go against what I had already been experiencing. And so I'm at a loss now. I'm no longer on this high frequency plane, and I'm thinking from a very logical place, like, I'm stuck. I feel stuck, and I don't know what to do. So I didn't mention any of this to my youngest son, but I did ask for a meeting because I was trying to see maybe if something else could be done as far as training or whatever, because it's kind of just hit the ground running. And so the time is approaching for me to be able to have this meeting. And my youngest son was online because school was still, remote at the time. And he stops and he looks at me and he says, Mom, he says, Jonathan told me to tell you to quit your job. And I look over at him and I said, what did you say? And he goes, Jonathan told me to tell you to quit your job. And I'm like, So I said, well, well, why didn't he just tell me that himself? Because I was in a place where I could sense him, feel him. It's still very early after him passing, and I'm like, I can communicate with him. You know, so many times I'd done it before. So why with this he's not saying something to me? And he says, well, I told him to tell you. He said, but then I looked at the clock and it said 11:11. So then that's how I knew I was supposed to be the one to say something to you. So I was trying to wrap my mind around that. And so I was just like, but why? So the meeting was approaching, and I just took a few minutes. I got silent, the gift of silence. I got silent. I went in the room, and I just, went to go calm myself and deep breathe and nurture my spiritual essence to kind of just, raise, like I said, raise my frequency. And my son was like, I said, well, how come you just didn't tell me? And I'm trying to sense him. And he's like, well, you couldn't hear me. You were too worried about, everything that I couldn't get through to you. And so I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because he used his brother to tell me. His brother's still in the third dimension. He's still in his physical form. Jonathan is now in his spiritual form. So he used his brother. So I was like, oh, all right. So then that gave me the confidence I needed to go out there and be like, you know what? Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm not going to be able to do this. It's a leap of faith that I had to be able to trust. And so I was like, all right, so I'll take you back your equipment and I'm off. So I did that. And the next couple of days, I was actually traveling to go out west where my sister is. And I ended up getting a call from someone, and I told her, well, I'm about to get on the road, and I'm actually not going to be able to talk to you until Tuesday. And she was like, oh, that works, because I'm traveling too, and Tuesday is also the day that I will be available. So I was like, perfect. So Tuesday rolls around, and it's time for our call, and we end up getting on the phone, and this person says to me, hello, my name is blah, and I am with the makers of Monopoly. And I said, what did you say? And she goes, I'm with the makers of Monopoly, the board game. And I was like, yeah, I know. And so I'm just taken back, and I'm just kind of floating and just having like this tingling in my fingers, like, oh my goodness, because I'm like, all right, she could have said the makers of Transformers. She could have said the makers of Play-Doh. She could have said all of these different things, but she said the makers of Monopoly. And why? Because nurturing my spiritual essence and having these synchronicities, she was a vessel that chose that particular product to tell that to me, so that I knew this is why my son was saying it's okay to quit your job. So I'm listening to her, and I'm just like smiling, and I'm going through the whole interview process. And I'm even thinking, like, you didn't even reach out to apply for this position. Like, they reached out to you. And I'm like, oh my goodness. The next day I was offered the position. Now, it was temporary. So in a previous video, I was saying I didn't have enough content to share at the time. So I really wanted to wait to see how this whole thing was going to turn out. So it was a temporary position that was made permanent. And what was so ironic about it was, when I was sitting there and I was thinking, like, I'm absolutely going to be able to take this job and heal, my thought process was like, the reason why this is different is because you're going to be able to attract talent to the organization. And it's the same type of people that made the game Monopoly that brought joy to your son. And in doing so, you're going to be part of the process, bringing people in that's going to bring joy to other people's children and other people's, family, the way that it happened for your son. That in and of itself was just enough to nourish me and nourish my spirit and my soul, and just, it was just like, I got you. You know what I mean? Like, not only are you going to be able to heal, but you're also going to be able to provide and take care of your needs and sustain your living and get back on track with everything. So the position that I had lost before was a certain amount, but the position that I was being offered was much more. It was much more than what I had made before. And so, having to kind of just start my life over, I was able to do that while healing at the same time. And so fast forward, several years later, that was what I was doing the whole time, to be able to, be in a place, and just several other synchronicities. Another one was a cardinal. I'm in Texas, and back when this whole thing happened, there was a freeze a couple weeks after my son had passed, and people lost power and everything, and there was this cardinal out of nowhere that kind of just showed up in the tree, and it was just chirping. And I'm like, hello, and I'm going back and forth with this bird. And, I would be like, cardinals, if anybody knows about that, it's a representation of your loved one. And I'm talking, and the bird is just chirping, and I'm like, there's no other birds, there's no other animals, we're in the middle of a freeze, like, how is this happening? And throughout the time that I worked there would just be, there'd be some times where I would be sad, or I would think about them, because you still have to heal, you still go through that process, you still cry, and little cardinals would just pop up, here and there, and I'm just like, wow, this is really happening. But if you could just stop and imagine if my perception or my perspective on this whole situation was different, if I was just very closed off, closed-minded, and the way that I chose to grieve him was different from what I did choose, I could have missed out on several different opportunities just because of how I chose to grow through the situation. And so the reason that I'm sharing it with you is because I want to be able to work with individuals that want to have an enlightening and healthy experience, and really feel what it is to experience the circle of life, because that's what I've been able to do, healthy habits, and heal, and think about things that are enlightening, and think about things that help nourish me, and be proactive in my health when it comes to getting out and talking to people, because I'm making all of these different connections and going to all of these different places I may have never been open to doing if it wasn't for turning my tragedy into a triumph. And so that's why I'm here, to talk about that and just kind of give you a different perception on being able to change the situation that is beyond your control, and not necessarily looking at it, from the eyes or the perception of something tragic, but turning it into your triumph so that you can have a fulfilled life regardless of the situation. All right. So hopefully this video resonated with someone, and perhaps it will resonate with someone that that it'll be conducive for. If so, I would love to be able to connect with you and just take a deeper dive on what the coaching courses would look like for you to be able to evolve in the midst of your own adversity. All right, feel free to click the link below so that you can set up your discovery call, or go on my page, or even reach out directly, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and remember to always be kind to yourself, because when you do, you will get to experience how good it feels to feel so good. Until next time, ta-ta for now.